The morning sun cast long shadows across the entrance of Pine Valley Shopping Mall as Marcus Thompson adjusted his worn baseball cap and checked his watch. His faithful companion, Rex, a golden retriever with intelligent brown eyes, sat patiently beside him. The dog wore a bright red service vest that read PTSD Service Dog in bold white letters. Marcus had been dreading this trip for weeks. After months of putting it off, he finally needed to replace his old combat boots, and the military surplus store in the mall was his only option within 50 miles of his small apartment. The thought of navigating crowds, dealing with loud noises, and managing his anxiety in such a busy place made his palms sweat. Rex sensed his handler's nervousness and gently nudged Marcus's leg with his nose. This simple gesture reminded Marcus that he wasn't alone. The two had been inseparable for 3 years, ever since Marcus returned from his second tour in Afghanistan. Rex had been specially trained to help veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress, and he had literally saved Marcus's life on more than one occasion. As they approached the main entrance, Marcus took a deep breath. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and they stepped into the bustling mall. The familiar sounds hit him immediately. Children laughing, music playing from various stores, the constant chatter of shoppers, and the echo of footsteps on tile floors. His heart rate began to increase, but Rex immediately moved closer, providing the grounding pressure that Marcus needed. They made their way through the central corridor, passing clothing stores, a food court, and various kiosks. Marcus kept his eyes focused ahead, trying to block out the overwhelming stimuli around him. Rex walked perfectly beside him, occasionally looking up to check on his handler's condition. The military surplus store was located on the second floor, which meant taking the escalator. Marcus had practiced this scenario many times with Rex during their training sessions. As they approached the moving stairs, Rex positioned himself correctly, and they stepped on together. Marcus gripped the handrail tightly, counting the seconds until they reached the top. Finally, they arrived at Warriors Gear, a small store packed with military equipment, uniforms, and outdoor gear. The owner, an elderly man named Frank, had served in Vietnam and always welcomed veterans with genuine warmth. Marcus had called ahead to make sure it would be okay to bring Rex inside. "Marcus, good to see you, son," Frank called out from behind the counter. "And there's my buddy Rex. How are you doing, boy?" Rex's tail wagged slightly, but he remained focused on his job. Marcus managed a small smile, feeling more relaxed in the familiar environment surrounded by military memorabilia that reminded him of better times with his unit. "I need some new boots, Frank. Size 10.5, if you have them," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anxiety he was still managing. "Absolutely. I've got several options that should work perfectly for you. Let me grab them from the back room." As Frank disappeared to retrieve the boots, Marcus and Rex waited near a display of tactical gear. The store was quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of the mall. Marcus began to feel his shoulders relax for the first time since arriving. That's when everything changed. A harsh voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere like a knife. "Excuse me, you cannot have that animal in here." Marcus turned to see a tall, thin man in an expensive suit striding toward them. The man's face was red with anger, and his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Behind him walked a younger woman in a mall security uniform, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. "Sir, this is a service dog," Marcus replied calmly, pointing to Rex's clearly marked vest. "He's legally allowed to accompany me anywhere the public is permitted." The man in the suit scoffed dismissively. "I don't care what kind of dog it is. This is a food establishment area, and animals are strictly prohibited. Health codes, you understand." Marcus looked around, confused. They were in a military surplus store, nowhere near the food court. "This isn't a restaurant, sir, and service dogs are protected under federal law." "Don't lecture me about the law, young man. I'm the mall manager, and I'm telling you that dog needs to leave immediately." The manager's voice grew louder, beginning to attract attention from other shoppers who were passing by the store entrance. Rex sensed the rising tension and moved slightly closer to Marcus, providing the calming pressure he had been trained to deliver. Marcus felt his anxiety spiking as more people began to stare in their direction. This was exactly the kind of confrontation he had hoped to avoid. "Sir, I'm a disabled veteran, and this is my registered service animal. He helps me manage my PTSD symptoms. Removing him would be discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act," Marcus explained, trying to keep his voice steady despite his racing heart. The mall manager laughed coldly. "PTSD? You look fine to me. Stop making excuses and get that mutt out of my mall before I call the police." The word mutt hit Marcus like a physical blow. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was a highly trained medical device, a lifeline, and his closest companion. The disrespect shown to his service animal felt like a personal attack on his service and sacrifice. Frank emerged from the back room with an armload of boot boxes, immediately sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked, setting the boxes on the counter. "I'm removing this person and his pet from the premises," the mall manager declared. "They're violating health codes." Frank's expression darkened. He had dealt with this particular mall manager before and knew the man had a reputation for power trips and treating customers poorly. "Now hold on just a minute. That's a service dog, and this young man is a veteran. They have every right to be here. Don't interfere, Frank, or I'll start questioning whether your lease should be renewed next year," the manager threatened, his voice dripping with menace. The security guard shifted nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but unwilling to challenge her superior. A small crowd had begun to gather outside the store, drawn by the raised voices and obvious confrontation. Marcus felt the familiar symptoms of a panic attack beginning to build. His breathing became shallow, his vision started to tunnel, and sweat beaded on his forehead. Rex immediately responded, moving to stand directly in front of Marcus and applying gentle pressure against his legs. The dog's training kicked in as he began performing deep pressure therapy, a technique designed to ground PTSD sufferers during anxiety episodes. "Look at that. The animal is attacking him," the mall manager shouted, pointing at Rex's therapeutic intervention. "Call animal control immediately." "He's not attacking anyone," Frank protested. "He's doing his job. That dog is providing medical assistance." But the mall manager was beyond reason, driven by his own ego and the need to assert his authority. "I want them both arrested for disturbing the peace and bringing an aggressive animal into a public space." Marcus struggled to find his voice as the panic attack intensified. The crowd, the shouting, the confrontation, it all reminded him of the chaos and danger he had experienced overseas. Rex continued his work, but even his expert training couldn't completely stop the symptoms that were overwhelming his handler. "Please," Marcus managed to whisper, "just let us leave quietly." "Oh no," the mall manager said with a cruel smile. "It's too late for that. You should have thought about the consequences before bringing that animal in here and disrupting my establishment." The security guard reached for her radio, clearly preparing to call for backup, while Frank continued to argue on Marcus's behalf. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Marcus realized that his worst fears about venturing into public were coming true. What none of them noticed was the tall, distinguished figure in a crisp military uniform who had been observing the entire confrontation from the mall's upper level, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. Colonel Sarah Martinez had been visiting Pine Valley Shopping Mall to pick up a birthday gift for her daughter when she heard the commotion coming from the military surplus store. A 25-year veteran of the United States Army, she recognized the signs of a service dog performing its duties from 50 feet away. What she witnessed next made her blood boil with righteous anger. The colonel stood 6 feet tall with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform displayed numerous ribbons and commendations earned through decades of distinguished service. She had commanded troops in Iraq, led humanitarian missions in disaster zones, and trained countless young soldiers. But nothing in her extensive military career had prepared her for the level of disrespect she was witnessing directed toward a fellow veteran. As she descended the escalator, Colonel Martinez observed the mall manager's increasingly aggressive behavior toward the young man with the service dog. Her trained eye immediately recognized several things that the ignorant manager had missed completely. The veteran's posture, his careful movements, the way he positioned himself near walls and exits, and, most importantly, the professional behavior of his service animal all told a clear story of someone dealing with invisible wounds from military service. The colonel had worked extensively with wounded warriors during her career, helping to establish several programs for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. She understood that PTSD was just as real and debilitating as any physical injury, and she knew that service dogs like Rex represented hope and healing for thousands of veterans struggling with the invisible scars of war. "Excuse me," Colonel Martinez said in a voice that carried the unmistakable authority of command as she approached the group. Her tone was calm, but carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The mall manager turned, clearly annoyed by another interruption to his power display. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. Please move along." Colonel Martinez stepped closer, and for the first time, the mall manager noticed her uniform and rank insignia. His confident expression faltered slightly, but his arrogance quickly returned. "I said this doesn't concern you, lady. Military uniform or not, I'm in charge here, and I'm having this person and his animal removed from the premises." The colonel's eyes hardened as she looked directly at the mall manager. "First, you will address me as Colonel Martinez. Second, this absolutely concerns me because you are harassing a disabled veteran and illegally attempting to remove his service animal." Marcus looked up at the colonel through his anxiety-induced fog, hardly believing that someone in uniform had stepped in to help him. Rex remained focused on his work, but his ears perked up slightly at the sound of the authoritative voice defending them. "Listen, Colonel, or whatever you are," the mall manager said dismissively. "This is private property, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone. That animal is disruptive and unsanitary. That animal is a highly trained service dog performing medical duties for a veteran who served his country with honor," Colonel Martinez replied, her voice growing colder with each word. "And your ignorance of federal disability law is not an excuse for discrimination." Frank, the store owner, felt a surge of relief as the colonel took charge of the situation. He had served under officers like her during his time in Vietnam and recognized the type of leader who would go to war for her soldiers. "Colonel, this young man is Marcus Thompson. He's a good customer and a fine soldier. He earned a Purple Heart in Afghanistan," Frank said, hoping to provide context that would help resolve the situation. The colonel's expression softened slightly as she looked at Marcus with professional respect. "What unit, soldier?" Marcus struggled to answer through his anxiety, but managed to whisper, "3rd Brigade, 82nd Airborne Division, ma'am." "Outstanding unit. I had the privilege of working with them during Operation Enduring Freedom." Colonel Martinez turned back to the mall manager with renewed intensity. "This veteran put his life on the line for your freedom, and you're treating him like a criminal for seeking the medical assistance he needs." The mall manager was beginning to realize that this situation was spiraling beyond his control, but his ego prevented him from backing down. "I don't care if he's a war hero or not. Rules are rules, and no dogs are allowed in my mall. Your rules cannot supersede federal law," the colonel stated firmly. "The Americans with Disabilities Act specifically protects the rights of individuals with service animals. By attempting to remove this veteran and his service dog, you are committing a federal crime." The security guard, who had been silent throughout most of the confrontation, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, maybe we should call the police and let them sort this out." "Excellent idea," Colonel Martinez replied without hesitation. "Please do call the police. I'm certain they would be very interested in documenting this clear case of discrimination against a disabled veteran." The mall manager's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Fine, I'll call them myself." He pulled out his cell phone and began dialing, confident that the authorities would side with him once they arrived. While they waited for the police, Colonel Martinez knelt down beside Rex, who was still providing deep pressure therapy to Marcus. She spoke softly to the dog, using the calm, reassuring tone she had perfected during years of working with traumatized soldiers. "Easy, boy. You're doing good work. Keep taking care of your soldier." Rex's tail moved slightly, acknowledging the colonel's presence while never breaking his focus on Marcus. The dog's professional behavior impressed her even more than she had expected. This was clearly an animal that had received extensive, expensive training from one of the premier service dog organizations. "Marcus," the colonel said gently, positioning herself where he could see her without having to look up, "I need you to focus on my voice and your dog's breathing. You're safe here. I'm not going to let anyone harm you or Rex." Marcus managed to nod slightly, feeling the first hint of relief he had experienced since the confrontation began. Having someone in uniform defending him brought back memories of the brotherhood and mutual support that had sustained him during his darkest moments overseas. The crowd outside the store continued to grow as word spread about the confrontation. Several shoppers had pulled out their phones and were recording the interaction, though Marcus was too overwhelmed to notice the additional attention. "You know what this is really about?" Frank said angrily to the mall manager. "You just can't stand the idea of someone challenging your authority. This has nothing to do with health codes or rules. This is about your fragile ego." "Shut up, old man. I'll have you removed too," the manager snapped back. Colonel Martinez stood up slowly, her full height and bearing commanding immediate attention. "That's enough. You will show respect for these veterans, or you'll answer to me personally." The authority in her voice was absolute, honed by decades of command responsibility. It was the voice that had ordered troops into combat, delivered life-changing news to military families, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. The mall manager, despite his civilian arrogance, unconsciously took a step backward. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I'm someone who has dedicated her life to serving this country and protecting the people who serve alongside me. I'm someone who understands the sacrifice this young man has made and the ongoing battle he faces every day. And I'm someone who will not tolerate the mistreatment of any veteran under my watch." The colonel's words carried the weight of absolute conviction, and for the first time since the confrontation began, the mall manager seemed to realize that he might have bitten off more than he could chew. In the distance, the sound of police sirens could be heard approaching the mall, and everyone in the group tensed as they prepared for the next phase of this unexpected battle. Officer David Chun and his partner Officer Lisa Rodriguez arrived at Pine Valley Shopping Mall expecting to handle a routine disturbance call. Both officers were experienced professionals who had dealt with countless mall disputes over their careers, but neither was prepared for the scene that greeted them on the second floor. "Officers, I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, United States Army. This young man is Marcus Thompson, a disabled veteran with a legitimate service animal. The mall manager is attempting to illegally discriminate against him in violation of federal disability law." Officer Rodriguez, who had military experience herself before joining the police force, immediately recognized the colonel's rank and bearing as authentic. She also noticed Rex's professional service dog vest and proper positioning beside his handler. "Sir," Officer Chin addressed Marcus directly. "Can you tell us what happened from your perspective?" Marcus was still dealing with elevated anxiety from the confrontation, but the presence of the police officers and Colonel Martinez had helped stabilize him somewhat. Rex remained alert and positioned to provide support if needed. "I came here to buy boots at Frank's store," Marcus explained, his voice still shaky but gaining strength. "I called ahead to make sure it was okay to bring Rex. This man," he gestured toward the mall manager, "started yelling at me, saying I couldn't have my service dog here. When I tried to explain the law, he got more aggressive and threatened to have us arrested." Frank stepped forward, unable to contain his anger any longer. "Officers, I've known Marcus for 2 years. He's a Purple Heart recipient who shops here regularly. This mall manager has been harassing my customers for months, but this is the worst I've ever seen. Officer Rodriguez examined Rex's service dog vest more closely, noting the professional quality of the equipment and the dog's calm, focused behavior despite all the commotion around him. This appears to be a legitimate service animal. What specific problems do you have with the dog, sir? The mall manager's confidence began to waver as he realized the officers weren't automatically taking his side. Well, it's a health code violation. Animals aren't allowed where food is served. Officer Chen looked around the military surplus store, noting the complete absence of any food service. This is a retail store, not a restaurant. Service animals are permitted in all public accommodations under federal law. But I'm the manager. I have the authority to set rules for this property, the mall manager protested, his voice rising with desperation. Colonel Martinez stepped forward with a folder she had retrieved from her briefcase. Officers, I took the liberty of printing out the relevant sections of the Americans with Disabilities Act from the legal database on my phone while we waited for your arrival. She handed the documents to Officer Chun, who began reading through the clear legal language that protected service animal access rights. The law was unambiguous. Businesses could not exclude service animals from any area open to the public, and discrimination based on disability was a federal crime. According to this, Officer Rodriguez said after reading over her partner's shoulder, the mall manager's actions constitute illegal discrimination. Mr. Thompson has the right to be here with his service animal. The crowd of onlookers began murmuring among themselves as word spread that the veteran was in the right, and the mall manager was breaking the law. Several people called out expressions of support for Marcus, and one elderly woman loudly declared that she would never shop at the mall again if they treated veterans this way. The mall manager's face grew pale as he realized the situation was completely out of his control. Wait, maybe we can work something out. I didn't realize there were special circumstances. There are no special circumstances to work out, Colonel Martinez said firmly. This veteran has the same rights as any other citizen, plus additional protections under disability law. What you did was not just wrong, it was illegal. Officer Chen closed the folder and addressed the mall manager directly. Sir, based on what I've witnessed here and the clear evidence of discrimination, I could arrest you right now for violating federal civil rights law. The veteran has done nothing wrong, and his service dog is obviously well-trained and non-disruptive. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him as the truth of the situation became clear to everyone present. Rex sensed his handler's improving emotional state and gradually reduced the intensity of his pressure therapy, though he remained alert and ready to respond if needed. Frank shook his head in disgust at the mall manager. You know what makes this even worse? Marcus earned that Purple Heart saving 3 of his fellow soldiers when their convoy hit an IED. He carried 2 wounded men to safety despite being injured himself. And this is how you treat him when he comes home? The colonel's expression softened as she looked at Marcus with increased respect. Is that true, soldier? Marcus nodded reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of attention for his military service. I just did what anyone in my unit would have done. My team was everything to me. And now Rex is your team, Colonel Martinez observed, understanding the deep bond between veteran and service dog that went far beyond a simple pet relationship. Officer Rodriguez had been thinking about the broader implications of the situation. Sir, she addressed the mall manager, you realize that this incident has been recorded by multiple witnesses? This could become a significant legal liability for the mall ownership. The mall manager's arrogance finally crumbled completely as the full consequences of his actions began to sink in. Not only had he illegally discriminated against a disabled veteran in front of dozens of witnesses, but he had done so in a way that could result in lawsuits, federal investigations, and devastating publicity for the shopping center. Look, maybe I made a mistake, he said weakly, trying to salvage what was left of his authority. Can't we just forget this whole thing happened? Colonel Martinez's response was swift and uncompromising. Forgetting is not an option. This veteran came here simply trying to live his life with dignity, and you humiliated him in public. Your actions today represent everything that's wrong with how our society sometimes treats those who have sacrificed for our freedom. Officer Chun was preparing to continue the investigation when his radio crackled with an unexpected message. Unit 47, be advised that you have a priority call from Mall Corporate Security requesting immediate contact regarding the incident in progress at Pine Valley. The group exchanged glances as Officer Chun stepped away to take the call. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression was serious and somewhat surprised. Gentlemen, ladies, he announced, it appears that Mall Corporate Security has been monitoring this situation through their surveillance cameras. They want to speak with everyone involved, and they've specifically requested that no one leave until they arrive. The mall manager's face went completely white as he realized that his bosses have been watching every moment of his illegal discrimination against a military veteran. The situation was about to become much bigger than anyone had anticipated. 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up to the mall's main entrance, and 3 individuals in business attire hurried through the corridors toward the second floor. Leading the group was Patricia Williams, the regional director of operations for Sunset Properties, the company that owned Pine Valley Shopping Mall and 12 other retail centers across the state. Williams had been in a board meeting when her phone exploded with urgent messages from the mall's corporate security team. The surveillance footage they had forwarded to her showed a clear case of disability discrimination being committed by one of her employees against a military veteran. As someone who prided herself on running ethical, inclusive businesses, she was horrified by what she had witnessed. Behind Williams walked James Chun, the company's chief legal counsel, and Maria Santos, the director of public relations. Both had been pulled into emergency consultation the moment the severity of the situation became clear to the corporate office. The crowd around Warriors gear had continued to grow as word spread throughout the mall about the confrontation. Several local veterans who happened to be shopping had joined the group, standing in silent solidarity with Marcus. The atmosphere was tense but supportive, with many people expressing their outrage at how the young veteran had been treated. Colonel Martinez? Patricia Williams approached the group with obvious respect in her voice. I'm Patricia Williams, Regional Director for Sunset Properties. I want to apologize immediately and profusely for the disgraceful behavior you've witnessed today. Williams then turned to Marcus, who was still accompanied by Rex, though the service dog had transitioned to a more relaxed position as his handler's stress levels decreased. Mr. Thompson, I am deeply ashamed that one of our employees treated you with such disrespect. What happened here today is completely contrary to our company values and policies. The mall manager, whose name tag read Robert Sterling, stood frozen as he watched his career crumble before his eyes. He had worked for Sunset Properties for 8 years and had always believed that his aggressive management style was what the company wanted. The sight of corporate executives rushing to apologize for his actions left him speechless. James Chin stepped forward with a legal briefcase. Mr. Thompson, I'm the company's legal counsel. I want to make it absolutely clear that our company fully supports your rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Mr. Sterling's actions today were unauthorized and directly violate both federal law and our corporate policies. Colonel Martinez observed the corporate response with professional interest. She had dealt with many organizations during her military career and could usually tell quickly whether people were genuinely committed to doing the right thing or simply trying to avoid negative publicity. Ms. Williams, the colonel said, I appreciate your response, but what matters most is ensuring that this never happens to another veteran or disabled person at any of your properties. You're absolutely right, Colonel. We're here to make this right, not just today, but going forward. Williams pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through documentation. I've already initiated a complete review of our disability accommodation policies across all our properties. Every employee will receive mandatory training on service animal laws within the next 30 days. Officer Chun had been observing the corporate response and was impressed by their immediate accountability. Ma'am, are you aware that federal discrimination charges could be filed in this case? Patricia Williams nodded gravely. Officer, we're fully prepared to cooperate with any investigation. Our company has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind, especially against those who have served our country. Frank, the store owner, had been listening to the conversation with growing satisfaction. He had dealt with Robert Sterling's arbitrary rule enforcement for years, but had never seen him challenged so thoroughly. Ms. Williams, I have to tell you, this isn't the first time your manager has created problems. He's been harassing customers and threatening business owners for months. Can you document specific instances? Maria Santos asked, pulling out a recording device. We need to understand the full scope of the problem. As Frank began describing a pattern of abusive behavior by Sterling, Marcus found himself amazed by how quickly the situation had transformed. An hour ago, he had been humiliated and threatened with arrest. Now, corporate executives were apologizing to him and taking immediate action to prevent future discrimination. Rex sensed the changing atmosphere and moved to his handler's side, offering gentle support without the intense pressure therapy he had been providing earlier. The dog's professional behavior continued to impress everyone present, serving as a living demonstration of how well-trained service animals functioned. Patricia Williams approached Marcus directly, her expression sincere and remorseful. Mr. Thompson, I know that apologies cannot undo the hurt and humiliation you experienced today, but I want you to know that our company will be making changes to ensure this never happens again. Marcus looked up at her, still processing everything that had occurred. I just wanted to buy some boots and go home. I never expected any of this. And that's exactly how it should be, Colonel Martinez interjected. A veteran should be able to go shopping with his service dog without facing ignorance and discrimination. James Chin opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. Mr. Thompson, our company would like to offer you a formal settlement that includes compensation for the discrimination you suffered, coverage of any legal fees, and a written guarantee that you will always be welcome at any Sunset Properties location. The offer caught everyone by surprise, including Marcus, who had not expected any kind of financial compensation. Officer Rodriguez, who had been taking detailed notes throughout the corporate intervention, looked up with interest. That seems like a very reasonable response to the situation, she commented. It's refreshing to see a company take responsibility rather than trying to minimize their employees' actions. Robert Sterling, who had remained silent during most of the corporate meeting, finally found his voice. Ms. Williams, I was just enforcing what I thought were proper policies. I never meant to discriminate against anyone. Patricia Williams turned to face her former employee with barely contained anger. Robert, you called a Purple Heart recipient service dog a mutt. You threatened to have a disabled veteran arrested for seeking the medical assistance he needs. Those weren't policy enforcement decisions. Those were personal choices that reflected poorly on your character and our company. The regional director's words carried the finality of a career-ending judgment. Sterling's face went pale as he realized that his 8-year employment with Sunset Properties was about to come to an abrupt end. Colonel Martinez stepped closer to Williams, speaking in a voice low enough that Sterling couldn't hear. Ms. Williams, what's most important is that your employees understand why service dogs are so crucial for veterans like Marcus. These animals represent hope, independence, and healing for people dealing with invisible wounds that may never fully heal. Colonel, would you be willing to help us develop our employee training program? We want to make sure our staff truly understands the significance of service animals and the sacrifices made by veterans like Mr. Thompson. The offer surprised and pleased Colonel Martinez. She had spent years working with various organizations to improve veteran services, and this seemed like an opportunity to create meaningful change that would benefit countless other veterans. As the corporate team continued their discussions with Marcus, Frank, and the Colonel, a local news crew arrived at the mall. Someone in the crowd had contacted the media about the veteran discrimination story, and reporters were setting up cameras in the corridor outside the store. The situation was about to become very public, and everyone involved was about to discover just how strongly the community supported their local veterans. News reporter Jennifer Walsh and Her cameraman had arrived at Pine Valley Shopping Mall expecting to cover a routine human interest story about veteran discrimination. What they found instead was a powerful narrative about courage, justice, and community support that would resonate far beyond their local viewing area. As Jennifer set up for her live broadcast, she interviewed several witnesses who had recorded the confrontation on their phones. The footage clearly showed Robert Sterling's aggressive behavior toward Marcus and Rex, Colonel Martinez's intervention, and the subsequent corporate response. Within hours, the video clips would be shared thousands of times on social media platforms. This is Jennifer Walsh reporting from Pine Valley Shopping Mall, where a disabled veteran faced discrimination while shopping with his service dog earlier today. What happened next demonstrates the power of standing up for what's right. She began her report. Marcus found himself reluctantly agreeing to a brief interview, with Rex sitting calmly beside him throughout the questioning. The service dog's professional demeanor served as a powerful visual reminder of the legitimate medical purpose he served in his handler's life. "I just want people to understand that service dogs aren't pets," Marcus told the camera. "Rex isn't just my companion. He's my lifeline. He helps me function in situations that would otherwise be impossible for me to handle." Colonel Martinez also agreed to speak with the media, using the opportunity to educate the public about the challenges faced by veterans transitioning back to civilian life. What Mr. Thompson experienced today is unfortunately not uncommon. Too many veterans face ignorance and discrimination when they're simply trying to live their lives with dignity. The interview with Patricia Williams focused on the corporate response and the changes being implemented across all Sunset Properties locations. This incident has been a wake-up call for our organization. We're committed to ensuring that every veteran and every person with disabilities feels welcome and respected at our properties. Frank, the military surplus store owner, provided historical context about the ongoing challenges faced by veterans seeking acceptance in civilian society. "I served in Vietnam, and when we came home, we faced a different kind of hostility. Today's veterans deserve better, and they deserve our support and understanding." Robert Sterling, the former mall manager, had been quietly escorted from the property by mall security after his termination was finalized. His 8-year career with Sunset Properties ended with a permanent mark on his employment record that would make future management positions extremely difficult to obtain. Officer Chan filed a detailed incident report that would be forwarded to the federal authorities for review. While Marcus chose not to press criminal charges, the documentation would serve as evidence if other discrimination complaints were filed against Sterling in the future. The legal settlement offered by Sunset Properties was generous and comprehensive. In addition to financial compensation, the company agreed to establish a veteran appreciation program at all their properties, offering discounts and special services to military families. They also committed to hiring a disability rights consultant to review all their policies and procedures. Colonel Martinez accepted the company's request to help develop their employee training program. She would work with their human resources team to create educational materials that would help staff understand the importance of service animals and the proper way to interact with veterans and disabled customers. As the news crew prepared to leave, several local veterans organizations arrived at the mall to show support for Marcus. The American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and Disabled American Veterans all sent representatives to ensure that the young veteran knew he was not alone in his struggle. Rex seemed to sense that the crisis had passed and gradually transitioned from his working mode to a more relaxed state, though he remained alert and ready to respond if his handler needed assistance. The dog's behavior throughout the entire incident had been a textbook example of proper service animal training and conduct. Marcus finally got a chance to try on the boots that had brought him to the mall in the first place. Frank insisted that the first pair would be a gift from the store, a small gesture of respect for the veteran's service and dignity in handling such a difficult situation. "These should serve you well," Frank said as Marcus laced up the new combat boots. "And you're always welcome here, no questions asked." The crowd of supporters that had gathered throughout the afternoon began to disperse as the immediate crisis resolved. Many people approached Marcus to shake his hand, thank him for his service, and express their outrage at how he had been treated. One elderly gentleman, who identified himself as a Korean War veteran, spoke for many when he told Marcus, "Son, you handled yourself with more grace and dignity than that manager deserved. Your service to our country continues to make a difference, even when you're just trying to buy boots." Colonel Martinez made sure to exchange contact information with Marcus before leaving the mall. "If you ever need anything, soldier, don't hesitate to reach out. The military takes care of its own, even after we hang up the uniform." As evening approached, Marcus and Rex finally made their way back through the mall toward the parking lot. The anxiety and humiliation that had overwhelmed him hours earlier had been replaced by a sense of validation and community support that he hadn't experienced since leaving the military. The news story aired that evening on 3 local television stations and was picked up by national news networks within 24 hours. The video footage went viral on social media, generating millions of views and thousands of supportive comments from veterans and civilians across the country. Patricia Williams followed through on all her commitments to reform company policies and employee training. Within 60 days, Sunset Properties became recognized as one of the most veteran-friendly retail companies in the region, earning awards from several veterans organizations. Robert Sterling's discriminatory actions had unintended positive consequences that extended far beyond Pine Valley Shopping Mall. His ignorance and hostility had sparked a community-wide conversation about veteran rights and the importance of service animals, leading to improved policies and greater awareness throughout the region. Marcus continued to shop at Frank's military surplus store, but he also began visiting other businesses throughout the mall without fear or anxiety. The support he had received gave him confidence to engage more fully with his community and to advocate for other veterans facing similar challenges. 6 months later, Marcus and Rex were invited to speak at the grand opening of Sunset Properties' new Veteran Resource Center, located in one of their largest shopping complexes. The facility offered employment assistance, mental health services, and support groups for veterans transitioning to civilian life. During his speech, Marcus reflected on the lessons learned from that difficult day at the mall. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become opportunities to create positive change. What happened to me was wrong, but the response from this community showed me that there are still people willing to stand up for what's right. Colonel Martinez, who had become a close mentor and friend, introduced Marcus at the event. This young man's courage in facing discrimination with dignity has made life better for countless other veterans. His service to our country didn't end when he took off his uniform. It just took a different form. Rex, now wearing a special ceremonial service dog vest for the occasion, sat proudly beside his handler as they were recognized for their role in creating positive change. The bond between veteran and service dog had been tested and proven unbreakable, serving as an inspiration to others facing their own battles with invisible wounds. The military surplus store display case now featured a photo of Marcus and Rex, along with a plaque that read, "In honor of all veterans who serve with courage, both in uniform and at home." Frank had installed it as a permanent reminder of the day when justice prevailed and a community came together to support one of their heroes. Years later, the story of Marcus Thompson and his service dog Rex would be used in disability rights training programs across the country, demonstrating how one person's courage in facing discrimination could create lasting positive change for countless others. The mall manager's moment of ignorance had accidentally sparked a movement that would protect and support veterans for generations to come.